Using open-ended questions during the investigative interview, Part 2. Evaluating the response to an open-ended question. When relating an incident such as being the victim of a robbery or an assault, the truthful account almost always contains 3 parts. The account will start off with an introduction that sets the stage for the main event. The second portion will be the incident itself, and the final stage will be the epilogue, in which the subject explains what he or she did after the incident and how the incident affected them emotionally. Please note, though, that this guideline for these 3 parts does not apply in the immediate aftermath of the event during which the subject will be experiencing significant trauma. In a truthful account, the subject's actions, thoughts, and behaviors resulting from the incident become just as significant as the behavioral components. The following account of a carjacking is typical of a truthful account. Well, I was on my way to pick up my 2 children, Dave and Laura, from preschool. I got off at work at about 6:15, and I had to pick them up over on Lake Avenue before 7 o'clock. Rush hour traffic was pretty bad, and I was afraid that I might be late. I was late picking the kids up last Tuesday, and the teacher gave me a hard time about that, so I decided to take a shortcut through the neighborhood off of Lombard. Those 2 paragraphs make up the introduction to this particular statement. I was distracted by the time and wasn't really thinking too much about where I was. At any rate, I was stopped at a red light on Lombard and St. Paul, and the car behind me bumped me. I was sort of startled, but it was just a bump, and I didn't think there would be any real damage. When I looked back, I saw this guy approaching my window, so I opened the door to talk to him. He told me there was damage to the back of my car, so I got out of my car to see what the damage was. He grabbed me by the shoulder and he said, "Take a hike," and pushed me away. He got into my car and did a U-turn going down St. Paul Drive the other direction. He squealed the tires and I jumped out of the way. The car that bumped me did the same thing. That is the main event. This whole thing happened in just a matter of seconds. I feel like such a fool. I've read about carjackings, but I didn't think it would ever happen to me, I wasn't physically hurt, but was sort of in a daze, and there I was in the middle of an unfamiliar neighborhood. I wasn't sure what to do. I walked to a Walgreens that was down the block, and they had a payphone where I called the police and the daycare center. The teacher agreed to wait for me, and after I talked to the police, I called a taxi and went and picked them up. And that's everything that happened. A deceptive account often does not contain these 3 segments. The deceptive subject, who does not want to lie unnecessarily, may provide an introduction and a main event, pretty sketchy on the epilogue or the aftermath of, in fact, a non-existent event. It is also suspicious when the amount of detail varies from one segment to the next. For example, if a victim spends 90% of the response offering a detailed explanation of the introduction and then glosses over the main event, clearly this would be suspicious. Contrast the earlier truthful response to this fabricated statement. Well, I was on my way to pick up my children from daycare and decided to take a shortcut off of Lombard down to St. Paul. As you know, that's a pretty bad neighborhood, and when I was stopped at a light, I thought I felt a jolt like someone hit me from behind. And this guy comes out and grabs me and pulls me out of the car and jumps in and drives away. It all happened so fast, I didn't get a good look at him. That's pretty much everything. Indications of truthfulness. In addition to evaluating the segments of a subject's response to an initial open-ended question, the investigator should listen for the following indications of truthfulness. Similar detail throughout the account. Depending on the significance and recency of the event, along with the person's background, education, and communication skills, some individuals will include much more detail within an account than others might. However, if the account is factual, there will be similar detail throughout the full story. Out-of-sequence information. Memories are not stored in real time the way a video camera records images. Rather, we have primary memories that may stimulate secondary memories. These less important memories may occur to the subject out of sequence within the account that they are relating to us. The fact that the subject includes out-of-sequence information offers support for the statement being derived from factual recall. In the first account of the previous carjacking incident, The statement about being late to pick up the kids last Tuesday is out of sequence. The subject decided to include the information in her account because it was factual. Guilty suspects typically do not lie unnecessarily during a response to the investigator's question. Expressions of thoughts and emotions. When relating a traumatic incident, it is suspicious if the subject does not include thoughts or emotional states because psychologically they are linked so closely with the behaviors. The truthful account of the carjacking incident includes a number of such thoughts, including, I didn't think there would be any damage, I felt like a fool, I was sort of in a daze. Indications of deception. Conversely, when evaluating segments of the subject's response to an initial open-ended question, the investigator should listen for the following indications of deception. Varying levels of detail. The investigator should be suspicious that an account may be deceptive if it contains a great deal of detail leading up to the main incident, but the description of the main incident lacks the same level of detail. Similarly, if the introduction and epilogue are very sketchy, but the subject offers a very detailed explanation of the main event, that might be viewed suspiciously as well. In either instance, there's an inconsistency of the amount of detail through the story. Perfect chronology within the account. When an account goes from A to Z without ever skipping back in time, it's going to be somewhat suspicious. It certainly may be an indication of a rehearsed story. The absence of out-of-sequence information suggests that the subject is not relying on normal patterns of recall. Now, keep in mind, however, that a truthful account that's been retold many times before that person gets to you may have developed a chronology just by sheer repetition of the story. The absence of thoughts or emotions. Deceptive accounts frequently focus entirely on behaviors: what happened, when it happened, how it happened, what was said, and so on. Because the account is fabricated and the individual did not experience the event, these reported behaviors occur in isolation from the normal process of experiencing thoughts or emotions, and as a result, the subject fails to express them as they relate the story. In a case involving fabricated robbery, the suspect was asked, "What was your reaction when you saw the man approach your vehicle?" His response was that he moved the money bags to the other side of the front seat. The investigator again attempted to elicit the subject's thoughts or emotions by asking, "Well, what were your thoughts when he approached you?" To which the subject responded, "I just stepped on the brake and moved the bags." Never once talking about how he felt. At no time did the subject state that he was afraid or had thoughts of being hurt or possibly even being killed. During the subsequent interrogation following the interview, he admitted stealing the money himself and making up the whole story about being robbed. Phrases indicating a time gap. There are key phrases to listen for during an open account that indicate the subject has consciously edited information from the account. Examples of these phrases include "the next thing I remember," "before I knew it," "eventually." The following are two victim statements that contain time gap phrases. In both examples, clearly the victim has edited information leading up to the main event. Example 1. I got up from my chair and went into his house. When I came back outside, he had spread a blanket on the ground and he asked me to join him. I sat down on a corner of the blanket, and the next thing I recall is being on my back with my clothes pulled up around my neck and him fondling me. Example 2. I asked the officer why we were stopped, and he told me that if I say one more word, he was going to kick my blank. I said I was sorry, I was just asking. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground getting kicked. In both of these accounts, common sense would suggest that the precipitations for these attacks were omitted from the narrative. Now, this does not necessarily mean they are fabricated accounts, but rather that the victim chose not to include the events immediately leading up to the alleged sexual assault or police beating. The omission may have been because of embarrassment or shame, which may indicate possible truthfulness, or perhaps because the victim was responsible for the action, which may negate the claim. The point is, time gap phrases help direct the investigator's attention to a portion of the account that requires clarification with additional questions. Clarifying the open account. Once the subject has completed his response to the initial open-ended question, the investigator should go back and ask clarifying questions. The following list can be used as a guide to help direct the interviewer to those areas that require further clarification. Sketchy details, illogical or unexplained behavior, time gaps, implied action phrases, people not identified, such as "we went to the mall," conversations, "I was on the phone for a while," qualifying phrases, "I believe," "I think," "as far as I can recall." Clarifying questions are open-ended questions that can be divided into three categories: questions that elicit more information, questions that seek an explanation for events, and questions that develop information about the subject's feelings or thoughts. The first category of questions are designed to elicit further information within a section of the subject's account. For example, "Please tell me more about the man who approached your car." "Please describe the vehicle that hit you." "What did you do after they drove away?" "Tell me more about the movie." The second category of clarifying questions seeks an explanation for events. For example, "Could you explain more fully why you were in that neighborhood?" "Why did you initially get out of your car?" "Why did you decide to go to that movie?" And the final category of clarifying questions develops information about the subject's feelings or thoughts. For example, what was your first reaction when you saw the man approach you? How did you feel toward the man who stole your car? With whom have you discussed this incident? After the investigator has asked a series of clarifying questions and the subject has volunteered all the information that apparently they're going to, the investigator should ask a number of direct questions to develop details of the event or situation that were not included in the subject's response to the original open-ended question. For more information on the use of open-ended questions, we recommend our book, Criminal Interrogation and Confessions. And if you're interested in learning more about the interview process and the interrogation process, we have a full list of our training programs on our website at reed.com. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes to view this video presentation.